Welcome back, traveller. Tonight we're stepping into a world where the quiet click of a key could brand you dangerous. In the Middle Ages, being tidy, punctual, and alone wasn't virtuous, it was suspicious. Privacy read like a confession. Routine was your only shield. I'll walk you through the unwritten rules that policed a woman's door. Curfew bells, watchmen's glances, parish fines, and those ruthless gossip courts. And show you the counter moves. How to turn bread into proof, neighbours into witnesses, and a simple broom into punctuation. By the end, you'll see how witch often meant woman with a plan, and how survival hid in plain sight. One ordinary ritual at a time. Before we dive in, hit like to keep this story flowing. Subscribe if you crave deep human history told like a fireside secret, and drop a comment. Where are you watching from? And what time is it on your clock right now? I want you to picture a narrow lane just after the bells, when curfew squeezes the light out of windows, and the watchmen thump their staves like metronomes of worry. I'm standing beside a small oak door, and the iron key in my palm feels heavier than it looks. Because in the Middle Ages, a key is never just metal. It's reputation. For women living alone in the Middle Ages, a key announces two things at once: privacy and suspicion. Turn it, and you'll hear the neighborhood lean in. That click is our leitmotif tonight, the sound of agency and of audit. Step inside with me. The room smells of rushes, beeswax, and bread that pretends to still be warm. On the wall hangs a belt of small keys and locks. Chest, coffer, pantry, back gate. I tell you this because the first rule for spinsters and widows is simple and brutal. Control what opens, and who can say they saw it open. If you rent your front chamber to customers for spinning or mending, the door becomes a witness. Leave it wide, and you're inviting. Quite often you're secretive. You can't win, only balance. By day, guardianship is a paper creature. By night, it grows teeth. A woman without a husband is expected to belong to someone: uncle, guild, parish. Don't panic. Belonging could be a shield or a cage depending on the parish clerk's breakfast. I've watched church courts read silence like a confession, and noise like a confession too. The trick is to have the right noise: the hum of a loom, the tap of a distaff, the Latin of a psalm. Industry is perfume. Idleness is smoke that blows toward fines. Let me show you defense that isn't steel. On the table, a small rosary, a tally of rent paid on time. 3 sworn neighbours who'll say you're up before dawn. Respectability rules run on rhythms. Same hour at market. Same greeting to the beadles. Same lamp snuffed when the curfew bell rolls over the roofs. Continuity calms people who fear surprise. When I mentor young beguines fresh from their house, I teach them the choreography. Open, greet. Leave the door ajar when a male customer comes. Stitch near the threshold where the street can see your needle argue with linen. Now, let's walk the edge of rumor. Most towns keep informal gossip courts, benches, fountains, bakehouse lines, where verdicts arrive faster than summonses. The charge sheet is always short. Who visits? Who lingers? Who laughed too loudly? Don't underestimate this tribunal. It fed the church courts like a mill feeds an oven. I've seen parish fines sprout from a neighbour's raised eyebrow. If you must host a friend after hours, leave a candle where the street can count the silhouettes. Privacy in public view is the medieval paradox. Perform it well, and you sleep easier. You're asking, what about the watchmen? Good. They like patterns. Bring them a heel of bread after the bell once a week, and yes, that's politics disguised as kindness. Their reports decide whether your key is called prudent or provocative. If they see your lamp steady, your shutter latched, your fetch water trips timed before moonrise, they'll speak your name with the right adjective. The same men can knock rudely if dice and drink loosen their caution. So I tell my students, keep a widow's lamp. Small, constant, boring. Boring is safety with a plain face. Notice the furniture. A bed close to the hearth, trunk at the foot, coffer near the wall. 2 stools, not 1 and not 3. I'm not being fussy. I'm drawing a diagram the parish understands. 1 stool says, I wait. 3 say, I entertain. 2 say, I work, I rest. I host a sister or a neighbor. The room speaks when you're not home. Even your broom has lines. Lean it by the door, bristles up on Sundays. Tiny signals accumulate until a reeve glances in and finds his suspicion boring itself to death. Let's talk money, because poverty can look like scandal and poor lighting. Spinsters live by thread and rhythm. Widows by the arithmetic of rent, eggs, and favors. Keep your dues in a pouch tied high. Keep 2 coins clean for the collection plate where eyes are hands. I write my accounts on wax, and recite them where people can overhear. 1 loaf, 2 candles, 6 ells of linen for Dame Joan. Transparency is armor. When the church courts sniff around, honest arithmetic is a better sermon than tears. And the Beguines. Oh, the Beguines changed the map. They made a 3rd space between nunnery and marriage, a quiet rebellion in plain wool. I visit their house when I can, warm broth, sharper minds. They hold property in common, pray hard, work harder, and irritate men who prefer women to be a sum owned by a singular. Not saints, not wives, neighbors with a rule. If you live alone near them, borrow their habits. The open workshop during daylight, the locked trunk, the list of patrons pinned by the door like a shield. There's also the body, which the town believes it owns on feast days and at funerals. Dress can guard you or betray you. A modest cap, dark kirtle, apron without lace. These say, I'm busy, inquire later. Dangling keys on a belt ring like status bells for respectable matrons. For you, hide them in your pouch. When you lock the door, press the iron against your palm and memorize that weight. It's your thesis against the neighborhood's footnotes. Every click says, I'll decide. And every dawn says, defend the decision. You can hear the street teaching you. The baker's boy knows who buys early. The sacristan knows who prays late. The midwife knows everything and forgives most of it. Befriend the midwife. She's the only person whose knock after dark will never cost you a fine. Carry her stool when she asks, and she will carry your name like a candle through rooms that collect rumors like soot. In a world where signatures are breath, a midwife's testimony is ink. Finally, I want you to stand again at the door with me. Smell the damp timber, the cold iron, the wool sleeve itchy at the wrist. Hear the curfew ripple like geese over the roofs. Place the key where your pulse lives and feel certainty rehearse itself. You'll still be inspected. You will still be told who you are before you speak. But that's why we practice the click. The door answers the neighborhood in its own accent. Firm, ordinary, final. Tomorrow we'll open it to daylight business. The spindle, the market, the unblinking eyes. And I'll show you how a woman alone buys safety. One small pattern at a time. I like to open the door just as the bell spills its last note, so the street sees me turn the key and hears the latch behave. That little ceremony matters more than breakfast. For women living alone in the Middle Ages, the morning is our court of first appeal. Sunlight, neighbors, and routine, all testifying. She keeps hours. I sweep rushes into the gutter while the baker's boy calls names like a town crier for bread. I pin my apron high, lay out the distaff, and put the stool near the threshold where eyes can audit me for free. It isn't paranoia, it's policy. Work is my perfume. Spinning sings softly in the doorway, wool whispering through fingers, dropped spindle tapping the thigh like a patient drum. Spinsters get their name from this drum beat, and I wear it the way a mason wears lime dust. Proof, not shame. Passers-by track the thread as if it were a line on a ledger, which in a way it is. Each yard cancels a rumor. I greet the watchman by name when they shuffle off the last of curfew, and they answer with a nod that means, "We saw your lamp obey the bell." Respectability rules love a chorus. By mid-morning, I carry finished skeins to market with the public grace of someone who knows she's being read like a notice. The storekeepers become my witnesses. 2 figs from Maud for mending her sleeve, a thumb of cheese from John in exchange for a neat hem. I speak the exchanges aloud because the street is a living receipt. Skein for half loaf, skein for wax. In a world where church courts can smell idleness at 50 paces, rhythm is my shield. Money is tidy, but reputation is faster. Guardianship follows me, even when I don't ask it to. An uncle's name on the rent book, or a guild elder willing to vouch, isn't just ink. It's scaffolding. I've learned to keep a folded letter from the parish warden in my pouch, dry as a biscuit and twice as useful. If a beadle asks why I walk alone, I let the paper speak before my nerves do. Widows have a different calculus. Less scaffolding, more grit, and a memory for faces that would shame a taxman. Everyone reads us. The trick is to control the script. The market itself is a gossip court with better produce. You can feel verdicts ripen at the fruit stall. Who sold 2 loaves to the wrong man? Who laughs too loose? Who keeps her door too tight? I stay near the honest scales and the woman who measures cloth with her elbow. Their reputations throw shade you can stand in. I make a point to buy candles where the sacristan buys his. Piety by association is a discount coupon for parish fines I do not intend to pay. When I pass the fountain, I draw water in full view. Clear jug, steady hand, no hurry. Back home, the workshop becomes a stage set for legality. I keep keys and locks where they can be seen without being counted. Trunk key on a hook. Pantry key tucked in the apron pocket that rustles when I move. If a customer is male, the door stays ajar, and I stitch by the threshold where the street can eavesdrop. If 2 women visit, the door may close, while bread bakes, but I let the scent testify for me. Bread is the safest chaperone I own. It answers questions nobody asked aloud. Some days I take the long road past the Beguines. Their house hums like industry, braided with prayer. I'm not vowed like they are, but I borrow their habits. Open shutters by day, closed coffers by night. Accounts pinned near the door so even a passing cat could audit the sums. The Beguines taught me the art of collective respectability. Names shared, errands swapped, griefs rationed. When a Beguine walks me home at dusk, I feel taller, not smaller. A neighbor who frowns at one woman alone will think twice when community strolls beside her. Clients come with their own weather. A merchant's wife brings expensive fabric and a gaze that inventories my soul. I meet it with clean hands and a neat table. A tinker's girl arrives with a tear in her sleeve and a mother's hope tucked in her pocket. I mend as if the cloth were temple veils. Everyone pays with coin or story. I accept both, but I stack the stories where they can be overheard. Her hem was short because her child grew fast, not because she's careless. You'd be surprised how much legal trouble dissolves in the warm water of ordinary kindness. I keep 2 ledgers, one of wax, one of witness. The wax holds sums and dates. The witness is the street's memory of me reading those sums aloud. If the summoner appears waving his parchment like a gull, I fetch both. See, I say, skein for bread, skein for wax, hemming for cheese, and then I point to Mrs. Alderney at the corner who nods like a bishop. Church courts often love the shape of virtue more than the substance. I give them both. It's weary work, but weariness is cheaper than appeals. Afternoons bring the quiet tests. A knock, too soft for comfort, asks if I can measure a bit of room for a traveller. I step into the doorway and let the entire street share the question. If his eyes skip my face to count the shadows behind me, I answer with the broom, sweeping him gently down the step with laughter that says, "Not today, sir. My door is not a trap, nor a rumour mill. It learns to close slowly enough that the neighbourhood can admire its hinge. When the bell tilts toward evening, I wind the day backward. The spindle rests, the stool scrapes back, the coins find their pouch like birds finding nests. I unhook the pantry key and let it kiss the iron ring, so the sound carries to the lane. The ritual is for me, but the acoustics are public. Watchmen appreciate civility they don't have to enforce, and I prefer my name in their mouths as a reason to pass by, not to pause. The street keeps score even when it yawns. And then the small domestic chorus. Pot clink, latch lift, wig pinch, a crumb for the sparrows. I taste the air for weather and worry, and the room answers with the warm vanilla of beeswax and the low earth of wool. If all has gone well, the day has left fingerprints I wanted to leave. Thread dust on the sill, a clean jug by the door, the faint shine of work on my nails. Tomorrow, I'll show you how to borrow more safety without owing a man. Lodgers chosen like chess pieces, alliances with midwives and millers, and the art of placing an empty stool where danger expects a chair. I learned early that a small house can be a fortress if you choose who crosses its threshold with the care of a chess player. A lodger is not just rent. A lodger is a witness you curate. In the mornings, when I turn the key and that familiar click answers the lane, I'm already thinking about the evening's cast. Men who travel alone after curfew smell like explanations. I prefer pairs, or kin, or a woman with a child who sleeps like a verdict. The watchmen respect patterns, and I arrange patterns they can hum along to. Interviews happen in daylight with the door wide, the spindle in motion, and the neighbors pretending not to listen. I ask about trade. Miller's helper, parchment cutter, pilgrim with stamped letters, and I ask about bedtime, the way a beadle asks about tithes. I watch boots, not mouths. Mud from the marsh means late nights. Clean edges mean early bells. My respectability rules are simple. Quiet hands, predictable hours, and debts that fit in a small purse. If a man flinches when I mention church courts, I send him to the next street with a cordial smile I keep for trouble. The best lodgers are the ones who upgrade your rumour profile merely by existing. A weaver's widow who brings her own stool, a beguined cousin who needs a week between houses, a vendor girl with cheese that makes the block forgive winter. These add domestic percussion the neighbourhood understands. When parish fines prowl for suspect households, I let the house speak. Keys and locks do their part, but nothing disarms gossip courts like furniture arranged to imply decency even in the dark. I keep a ledger for coin, and another for character. The coin ledger lives in wax and ash. The character ledger lives in the way a lodger folds a blanket, the way they greet a watchman, whether they offer a candle stub to the midwife passing at dusk. A man who tips his hat to the midwife and carries her basket once would be forgiven a late return on market night. A lodger who slinks past the gossip courts at the bakehouse will be measured in whispers. Guardianship can be borrowed, so can suspicion. I collect the former like buttons and avoid the latter like fleas. Fees are modest but exact. I charge 1 loaf a week for the fire, a penny for rushes, a promise to be home by the second bell after curfew unless escorted. People think rules like these are chains. I found their keys. Every declared boundary is an alibi already written. When the beadle asks why my lamp burned late, I can answer, the beguine and I were unknotting linen. You may ask her, and he will, because he knows her house keeps better accounts than his conscience. You'd be surprised how much security costs in soup. I keep a pot low on the trivet. Onions, barley, whatever grace sent from the market, and an extra bowl polished like intent. Hungry men make foolish promises. Fed men keep simple ones. A ladle at the right hour turns a fidgeting lodger into a storyteller whose timeline the neighbors can remember. He came early. He ate. He yawned. He slept. Narrative is insurance. I pour it with pepper. Alliances should be chosen like spices, a little often, and always fresh. The midwife gets a stool by the hearth, and my best bread end. She repays me with a name spoken softly, when the town sharpens its knives. The miller's wife sends bran and loud laughter. I mend her sleeves so the church courts see her piety in tidy seams. The beguines lend me their surplus virtue, simply by walking beside me on market days. None of this is power the way men count it. but it is the kind that keeps doors from being questions. When a man insists on a corner after dusk with coin that clanks like trouble, I counter with daylight. Come tomorrow. Bring a reference. You may leave your name with the watch. If his face learns manners, perhaps we deal. If not, the lane has seen me place him into the arms of the rules, and rules love an audience. Curfew isn't merely a bell, it's a choreography. I move with it, not against it, because women living alone in the Middle Ages don't win by speed. We win by timing. Here's a trick I teach the younger spinsters: the empty stool. Place it near the door, visible from the lane, blanket folded just so. It tells late visitors that someone might be expected soon. Expectation is a cousin of protection. A room whispers safety when it looks like it has plans. I've seen watchmen soften their grip on a staff at the sight of that extra blanket. They imagine a brother, an uncle, a respectable neighbor, guardianship with a coat arriving any minute. Let imagination work for you. It's cheaper than a sword. I'm frank about house law. No dice indoors, no songs after the second bell. If you cry, do it by the fire where the room can keep you company. In return, I offer steadiness, a latch that behaves, bread that pretends to be warm even when it isn't, and a place where being tired is not a crime. People pay coin for beds and gratitude for dignity. Gratitude circulates like heat. It keeps my lamp small and my nights uneventful, which is the kind of luxury most widows would mortgage heaven for. Sometimes the parish decides to count lives like sheep and asks who spends which night where. I write the names myself, in my hand, on my wax, and read them aloud at the fountain, so the gossip courts can correct me if I'm lying. That public recital tastes like vinegar, but vinegar is what keeps meat from turning. The beadle likes order, the neighbors like a show. I like sleeping without surprise knocks. Everyone gets something. Even the watchmen take the long way around, because boredom has become my brand. And yes, there are nights when the street stiffens like a cat. The rumor of soldiers in town, a theft, a shout that launches shutters. On those nights I move the extra stool to the threshold, set the spare cup beside it, and let the room dress itself in calm. I turn the key with the same weight I always use, so the click says what it always says: ordinary, ordinary, ordinary. Tomorrow we'll walk the line between dignity and defiance in a different arena. The guild hall and the small laws of money, contracts, and oaths that let a woman sign her day in ink instead of breath. Would you like to see how a neat signature can out-argue a loud man? I like the sound a guild hall door makes in the morning. Old oak exhaling, iron strap humming like a low note. I arrive with my hands clean and my ledger cleaner, apron pinned high so my work can be read the way a clerk reads Latin. Men glance up, surprised as always to find a woman where oaths echo, but surprise isn't a law. I offer the beadle my token, wax seal with a spindle cut into it, and he waves me forward because coin, dues, and punctuality are a language even suspicious ears understand. For women living alone in the Middle Ages, paperwork is armor that doesn't clank. The hall smells of tallow, ink, and dried herbs from last year's feast. The floor remembers boots better than names. I stand beneath the painted patron and state my business. To register commissions, to witness weights, to renew my right to sell thread by the EL rather than by the rumour. A clerk scratches my mark beside my name. My letters are good enough to shame a lazy man, and good enough is the correct size for this room. Guilds are choirs. You don't need a solo, you need harmony. Respectability rules love a chorus kept in tune. My first contract of the day is small, which is exactly why it matters. A merchant's wife brings Flemish linen, and the gaze of someone who envies souls for sport. We set terms aloud, price, deadline, who carries fault if rain intrudes, and the clerk repeats each point as if teaching the wall to remember. I pay a crumb of fee for the stamp, then press my seal, so the wax cools with my spindle sleeping in it. Keys and locks keep doors safe, seals and ink keep time honest. Credit is just guardianship in civilian clothes. So I curate mine like herbs, dry labeled within reach. I use tally sticks for larger orders, my cut, her cut. So when gossip courts at the bakehouse try to price my character, I can show wood instead of weather. If a buyer asks for grace, I grant it in writing and read it aloud. Sound is part of the spell. When promises have a voice, church courts hear them without having to be invited inside my kitchen. You'd laugh at how many quarrels die at the scale. Mass. I carry my own weights, checked against the guild's brass, and I wipe them with vinegar, where everyone can see. Fair measure, I say, and I let the measure say it back. Parish fines, love. Ambiguity. Honest ounces are a sermon they can't easily argue. When the watchmen shuffle in to warm their fingers, they see the brass, not just the woman, and they mark a different note beside my name. Useful. Apprenticeships for women are a tangle, so I keep mine informal and public. Cousin's girl sits by my stool 3 afternoons a week, and I pay her in bread, thread scraps, and the kind of advice that keeps doors from becoming stories. I record her hours in wax, not to trap her, but to liberate her later with proof. If a man says she loitered, I produce her tally and 2 witnesses. If he says I misled her, I produce her mother with a look that could rebuke a bishop. Paper can be a mother hen if you teach it to cluck. Disputes happen, and I prefer mine small and scheduled. When a customer forgets the second half of the coin, I don't knock after curfew. I pin a neat notice on the church porch. Due, date, agreed mark. And I stand under it after Mass, as if it was simply weather. The town reads bulletin boards with the same appetite. It reads scandal. By evening, the debt returns escorted by embarrassment and a pie. No parish fines, no tears, and my lamp burns the exact hours it ought. I keep 3 oaths in my pocket, the way some keep charms. First, never sign what I can't say aloud twice without blushing. Second, never let a handshake hide in a shadow. Third, always leave a paper echo wherever money changed hands, ink, wax, or tally. These oaths make me dull in the most beautiful way. Dull women sleep by tea. Dull women are hard for idle men to describe convincingly when church courts want a story spiced with sin. There's a clerk in the hall who dislikes me, which is natural. I am tidier than his conscience. When he delays a stamp, I bring a witness. When he loses a note, I produce mine. When he sighs about female troubles, I place a perfectly measured skein on the table so the room can admire arithmetic with its morning wine. Institutions will call you names if you let them. I prefer to be predictable. Paper trains rooms to treat you as a schedule, not a surprise. The Beguines taught me a trick with contracts. Add mercy on purpose. A clause for sickness. A clause for feast days. A clause that lets an honest delay remain honest. Men think mercy is weakness. I have watched mercy keep ropes from snapping. Customers return to the store, where they were measured like humans rather than baskets. And when the gossip courts ask why my door sees so many faces, I answer, because people pay their bills where they are not humiliated. Sometimes a man with a seal the size of a saucer thinks size makes him right. I counter with a row of small documents that add up to a wall. Rent paid, dues stamped, weights checked, orders witnessed, candles bought for the patron. Each slip is a pebble. Together they are a road I can walk across even when the water rises. If he insists on theatre, I insist on audience. We stand beneath the saint. The clerk reads the contract. The street listens. I have learned that loud men forget that sound belongs to everyone. And then there's the music of closing time. Ink capped, stamped, stacked. The guild door booming like a drum that dreams of cathedrals. I tuck my ledger against my ribs where a foolish heart might once have lived, and I walk home with the deliberate pace of a woman who has receipts. The lane brightens when it sees me coming. The latch concedes with that familiar click that has become our refrain. Tomorrow I'll show you the darker half of the equation. What to do when paper fails, when a lie outruns a seal, and when a knock after dusk means your name has been summoned anyway. Ink is strong. Breath is stronger. We'll learn how to spend both. The knock came thin as winter. Just after curfew turned the lane into a held breath. I felt for the key on its ring. Cold comfort, and let the latch answer with our old refrain. Click. Ordinary. Click. But the parchment slid under anyway. A little snake in church Latin. That's how it happens when rumors outrun seals. You do everything right, and still church courts ask for your face at dawn. Put the kettle on out of habit. Steam steadies hands. For women living alone in the Middle Ages, tea leaves don't tell the future. Neighbors do. You go tidy, not grand. Clean kirtle, mended hem, apron that announces bread more than vanity. I tuck my ledgers, coin and character, under the arm where a foolish heart once lived. Outside, the street has the metal smell of frost and the mossy breath of damp stone. I time my walk with the watchman's round and greet them by name. A heel of bread buys their memory of last night's lamp behaving. Respectability rules begin before the courthouse, with shoes that make a trustworthy sound, and a gate that says, "Yes, I keep hours." I never walk alone to a summons. The midwife takes my left like ritual. A beguine takes my right like arithmetic. We speak ordinary things, sausages, weather, wax, loud enough for shutters to overhear. Gossip, courts love a gap. We leave them none to pour into. At the corner shrine I light a small candle, not to bribe heaven, but to remind the lane that gods, too, keep witness lists. A weaver's widow nods from her stall. Widows feel wind changes before flags do. The courtroom smells of old wax, damp cloaks, and ink that thinks highly of itself. I stand where the light falls honest, hands still, eyes level. A clerk blinks at seeing letters live in a woman's mouth. I don't perform, I pronounce. I sell thread by the eerie, spin by the door, sleep by the bell. I lay out keys and locks on the table like punctuation. Trunk, coffer, pantry. Props help slow minds keep up. When asked about nights, I give verbs, not adjectives. Swept, snuffed, barred, slept. Bring your witnesses like tools you actually use. Maud the fruit seller remembers my morning coins. John the cheeseman remembers my loud arithmetic. The watchmen recall the steadiness of my lamp. The beguines are best. Their reputations sit in the room before they do. Let them speak first so the clerk's quill learns a friendly rhythm. I correct nothing that doesn't need correcting. In rooms like these, eloquence is how mistakes breed. Simplicity is how they starve. The questions arrive with soft teeth. Who visited? Why late? Why closed? I answer the traps with patterns. Door, ajar for men, wide for air, closed for baking. Neighbors saw bread steam at vespers. I say curfew not like a shackle, but like a schedule I help keep. I recite my Tuesday, market, washing, mending, psalm, until even the beadle yawns. Boredom is better than brilliance here. Brilliance pays parish fines. About those fines, treat them like winter. Expected, survivable, no place for pride. I bargain respectfully to turn coin into candles, public penance into extra alms at the bakehouse, a week's humiliation into the price of 2 loaves. Let me pay in thirds, I say, so the purse doesn't squeal. I've learned that a clerk who sees your arithmetic will sometimes remember his own. If you must kneel, kneel as if counting stitches. Obedience can look like industry from a generous angle. When paper proves thinner than rumor, use voice. After Mass, I read my ledger at the porch, yes, aloud. Skein for bread, hem for wax, rent on the quarter. I pin a neat list under the saint where everyone with a tongue also has eyes. It tastes like vinegar, that kind of transparency, but vinegar keeps meat honest. Gossip courts steal in the dark. I prefer daylight theft, where losses are smaller and easily replaced by the next loaf. Repairs continue at home. I reset the stage the way a careful cook resets a fire. The stool near the threshold, spindle visible, broom leaned like a witness. I leave the door unlatched a finger's width in the afternoon, so the lane can count silhouettes, woman, work, occasional neighbor. At dusk, I gift the watchman a crust and a name to remember beyond mine. The midwife sat late. Her stool is still warm. Names are bridges. I lay them plank by plank. Not every story can be untied with paper or patience. Some need an emergency kit. A spare candle for a poor excuse of a night, a rosary for nerves, a tally stick you can snap in half to make a promise visible, a proverb from my grandmother. Let the door teach the knock. I also keep a small scrap of red thread to tie around Fear's finger. The old women swear it works, and my heart agrees to believe the evidence when it's tired. There is a private cost nobody finds you for. Sleep that moves like a wary cat. Lungs that take shallow sips. Shoulders that learn to wear weather. I pay it, and then I ask the bill to teach me something. Humor helps. If I were a witch, I'd tell my spindle when it tangles. I'd charm you straight. It snorts. Yes, wood can snort, and behaves. Thinsters endure by making furniture accomplices. Beds that remember curfew. Doors that speak in clicks. Pots that keep secrets by boiling them away. By week's end, the lane grows bored with my virtue again, which is the prize I want most. I lock, I breathe, I sleep. The summons folds into a drawer where old dramas turn meek as receipts. But I don't mistake this for safety. I call it intermission. The next act happens at night markets and bakehouse lines, where news walks faster than law. There I'll show you how to borrow a crowd's spine, where to stand, what to carry, who to laugh with, so that even on the dimmest road, a woman alone travels inside a moving ring of light, ready to learn how a basket and a joke become armor. I time my bread run to the rhythm of ovens. First bell after dusk, for shaping, second for loading, third for that soft thunder when crusts find their courage. The lane is a braid of lamplight and shadow, and I join the bakehouse queue like a note in a familiar song. Lines are not mere lines, they're neighborhoods rehearsing themselves. I choose my spot near Mother's and Miller's, where laughter keeps its elbows out. Watchmen drift through like slow comets. I greet them with names, not fear. Ordinary is the cloak I wear over everything sharp. A basket is a passport. I carry mine with the mouth open, cloth folded back, so even a fussy neighbor can count emptiness and feel calmer. On top, a small jar for yeast, a string of onions, a note pinned to the rim, with the day's order in my tidy hand. Respectability rules are door props that volunteer explanations. I let the basket speak while I keep my face gentle and busy. For women living alone in the Middle Ages, a well-behaved basket is half a chaperone. The bakehouse itself breathes like a creature. Hot lungs, flour in its hair, a white roar of steam when the door yawns. I stand where heat kisses but doesn't bite, where the bench blockers can't pin me, where the peel man can see my nod and place my loaf without theatre. Flour dust gilds everyone, which is a democratic miracle. A widow looks like a merchant's wife for 5 minutes. A tinker's girl looks like a saint who's forgotten vanity. If there were gossip courts here, they'd find the oven for making us equal. Noise is medicine. I trade small jokes with the peel man. Dry, clean, time to the third bell. If I were a witch, I'd charm your crusts browner. He snorts, which is the closest a tired man gets to applause at midnight. Humor ties threads between strangers faster than kinship. I never flirt. I collaborate. A decent quip can part a crowd like a boat's keel and carry me to the counter without looking like a shove. Roots home matter more than bread. I favor streets with doorways I've paid for in kindness. 2 candles from the widow, mended hem for the sacristan's wife. A small beguine blessing earned with an honest helping of wood. Guardianship, when you're stubborn about your solo, is an ecosystem you water one errand at a time. If a drunk staggers into my path, 3 thresholds lean forward with interest. Predators hate audiences. I collect audiences like charms. Curfew is not silence. It's choreography. Bells give the counts. Feet keep the time. I move on the bell's far side where most watchmen are finishing one sweep and beginning another. 2 layers of law passing like geese. If I must stop, I stop under a lamp where beeswax betrays every lie. A door clicks open behind me. Our recurring leitmotif. And a friendly voice says, "Is that you, Joan?" Even when it isn't. I've rehearsed that line with 3 neighbors. It spends almost as well as coin. Some nights I buy more than I need on purpose. 2 loaves stacked are social currency. I press one into the hands of the crankiest woman in line and say, "For your early bell." She will argue with heaven tomorrow on my behalf if church courts ever ask who rises before dawn. Gratitude has a long memory when fed warm. The second loaf buys me a walking companion without the price of conversation I'm too tired to make. Keys and locks become theatre in miniature the moment I reach my door. I let the iron show in my palm, not hidden like contraband. Then I lift the latch slow, so the street can hear my house remember me. 2 movements, unhurried, legible. A man who means mischief hates that sound. It puts witnesses in his imagination. I hang the key from my belt, while I shake crumbs from the basket, then nest it back in the pouch with a sigh loud enough to count as alibi. If the night market calls, saltfish, almonds, a ragman's bargains, I walk the triangle between stalls I've taught to like me. The nut seller saved me once with nothing but his shout, "Hoy, your aunt said turn back." I don't have that aunt, but the street decided I did, and a fiction that guards you is a cousin of truth. I buy a handful even when I don't want them. A thank you is a wall that gets taller each time you lean on it. I keep a ritual for ugly hours, stop at the public shrine, touch my fingers to the stone, and speak the day's plain facts under my breath. Done 3 skeins, paid the rent, no visitors after bell. It isn't piety for show. It's me leaving a breadcrumb trail for my better self to follow home. If parish finds ever come searching for late-night mysteries, they'll trip over this ordinary litany and get bored. Boredom is the moat I build around my name. When I'm unlucky and the lane coughs up a problem, I borrow the crowd with a single sentence said like a bell. Who will walk me to the corner? There is always someone. Spinsters in pairs, a miller's son with flour in his hair, a kettle tender who loves an errand. I learned not to apologize for needing the escort. I pay it forward on bright mornings by carrying news and buckets. In a town where ink is rare, mutual escort is how we sign one another's safety. Back inside I spread the cloth, let the crust sing its cooling song, and open the window a hand's breadth so the lane can smell proof of virtue. A supper that won't be explained any other way. Heat folds into quiet. I tuck away the extra loaf, leave a heel on the sill for the sparrows, and let my shoulders unclench one vertebra at a time. Tomorrow we'll step off the street and into the small court of the body. Sleep, washing, the little ablutions that kept us credible, because even a clean ledger stumbles if your hands tell a different tale. I've learned the body keeps a ledger the courts can't misread. Before dawn I touch water, to eyelids, wrists, and the soft hinge behind each ear. Then a cloth warmed by the hearth chases night away in slow circles. Lye soap is honest but bossy, so I follow it with vinegar water and a drop of rosemary if coins allow. Breath gets a pinch of salt, and a twig of mint chewed like a psalm. Gossip courts inspect faces faster than ledgers. I give them clean skin and neat hair so they grow bored before they grow creative. Linen is my real soap. I change the shift often, because clean by change is a sermon the street understands without Latin. A fresh hem peeking at the wrist reads like a notarized note. I keep my nails short so thread doesn't snag, and I rub my hands with a crumb of tallow after work so they look like I labor and still respect myself. Respectability rules are written in cloth long before they reach paper. A tidy cuff has argued me out of more trouble than any speech. Water is both friend and rumor. On market days I draw from the public fountain in full daylight, jug held where everyone can count the clarity. Bathhouses exist, yes, But a woman alone entering one after curfew invites a choir without music. I wash at home by the fire. Basin, cloth, patience. In summer I add rainwater caught in a clean pail. In winter I melt snow, because snow has no opinion. The watchmen pass, and see steam, not scandal. Hair is politics with a comb. I plait mine simple and cover it, pins tucked where they can't wink at passers-by. Oiled a fingertip's worth, never more. A loose curl is a rumour with teeth. A smooth braid is a lullaby. Widows may dress plain. Spinsters are watched for vanity they allegedly can't afford, so I keep my mirror small and my comb decisive. The Beguines taught me to bless the braid. Order in the hair. Order in the day, they say. Laughing. And then they get back to work faster than any man I know. Sleep is also part of the case I present. I set the bed close to the hearth, but not greedy for it, and I keep a stool beside for the lamp, the rosary, and the ledger of very small truths, snuffed at the bell. Bread set to rise. I leave the shutter cracked a finger, so the lane can count a steady flame, never a theatrical blaze. When I turn the key and our old refrain clicks, the room answers with its own tick of cooling iron, sigh of rushes, and I sleep inside, an alibi I've rehearsed. Night is when fear tries on costumes. I pin the door with the bar, rest the poker within reach, and hang the key where my hand remembers it, even in the dark. Keys and locks speak in a grammar everyone can hear. One iron syllable can calm a fussy heart 2 houses down. If thunder complains, I recite the day backward, swept, spun, sold, paid, and fear loses interest. The body learns these lullabies like steps. It sleeps because the steps don't change. I keep a small sick-room kit in a basket under the bed. Thyme for steam, vinegar for wiping, a cloth boiled honest, a prayer for the parts medicine can't find. No theatrics, only steady remedies. If illness visits, I put the stool in the doorway and let the neighborhood count my care. A door that admits light and air reads like guardianship. A door that sulks makes parish fines lick their lips. Mercy is practical. It shortens fevers and suspicions. Scent is a witness too. I bake when I can. Bread, apples, anything the lane recognizes. A house that smells of cinnamon and yeast won't be mistaken for a tavern. On lean weeks, I warm a jar lid with rosemary or peel lemon for the peel's sake alone. Even a humble kitchen can perfume a radius big enough to hold a reputation. The nose convinces quicker than ink. I've watched a beadle soften because my door exhaled supper at his impatience. Clothes rest where eyes can see them behave. Apron airing by the hearth. Shoes drying with toes up like polite children. Stockings mended before they can become stories. I stitch in the threshold. Never on the bed, because beds are for sleeping and whispers. When a man peers in and sees labor, seated upright and linen hung like little flags of order, he forgets the question he came to ask. Domestic geometry defeats curiosity more reliably than sharp words. Even small aches have their place in the choreography. I rub the shoulders with warmed oil, stretch hands until the fingers stop clicking like cold gears, and lie flat a breath longer than necessary, so the spine can forgive me for being alive. A body that moves cleanly through the day sells trust with every step. I limp. I explain it before the lane can. Spindle argued with my foot. Laughter turns limp into life. Silence turns it into scandal. On feast eves I add a little beauty, not because men require it, but because I do. A ribbon clean as a bell note. A sprig of green tucked where only the honest eye notices. Church courts may count extravagance. they rarely find cheerfulness. Joy is a modest, useful perfume. It seasons the room the way salt seasons broth, discreet, essential, and likely to keep neighbors hungry for your company, not your downfall. By week's end, the mirror and the basin have done more lawyering than any clerk, and the bed has written testimony in the lines of my face. Rested, regular, unsurprising. Close the shutter, pin the latch, and feel the body answer. Yes, we have behaved. Tomorrow we'll carry this quiet defense into louder rooms, parades, saints' days, and the public theatre, where a woman alone can vanish or shine depending on where she stands. Come with me. I'll show you how to borrow a crowd's light without losing your outline. Festival mornings taste like brass and honey. Bells shake dust out of rafters. Garlands go up where laundry usually rules. And the lane smells of crushed rosemary under 100 careful feet. I dress for daylight scrutiny, not romance. Clean shift, sober kirtle, apron pinned high, so thread dust doesn't read as neglect. Trick for women living alone in the Middle Ages is simple. Borrow the day's brightness without letting it borrow you. I choose the route with saints and sausages, not alleys and arguments, and I walk as if my name had a spine. Processions are maps of respectability rules pretending to be songs. I take my spot near midwives and guildwives, where the air is thick with lavender and legal witness. A candle in my hand does more than shine. It notarizes my presence. Watchmen like patterns, so I give them one. Same corner, same nod, same steady flame. I step forward to lift the hem of a child's dress from the mud. Half the parish sees it. Guardianship can be public and portable. Sometimes it fits in a candle stub. Offerings are choreography. I bring a modest libum for the shrine, and 2 coin for alms. But I time the giving where eyes are kind, and many. Church courts sniff out ostentation and stinginess both. So I keep the middle path, palm open, wrist steady, face ordinary. A loaf tucked under my arm travels like a promise. When I break it with the widow at the gate, gossip courts are forced to call it kindness rather than theater. Bread is the only sermon I can afford to preach in public. Street games and revels ask for boundaries with a smile. When boys dance in a ring, I lend rhythm with a clap. When men ask for a turn, I laugh and offer the ribbon for them to hold instead. I've learned to say, my uncle is watching, even if my uncle is a beetle-shaped idea. Humor does the heavy lifting that no scold can accomplish. Widows and spinsters carry jokes like veils, transparent enough to see through, practical enough to deflect flies. At the fair stalls I stand where witnesses grow, not where bargains hide. If I must count coin, I do it over the grain seller's scale, with his brassy justice touching my fingertips. Keys and locks stay quiet in my pouch. I never flaunt iron in festive light. A folded tally stick peeks from the basket like a friendly thorn, visible proof that debts in my world are measured wood to wood, not whisper to whisper. Traders who dislike daylight arithmetic earn my best, emptiest smile. Clerks love lists, and parades are lists in motion. I let the sacristan see me when banners pass. I catch the eye of the parish warden and tilt my chin like a checkmark. It isn't vanity. It's minutes in the ledger that later argue for me when signatures are scarce. If he asks for names, I volunteer 3. Midwife, Beguine. Miller's wife. So his page fills with women whose reputations weigh like lead. Paper is heavy. I help it remember the right details. Gossip courts rebrand themselves as bakehouse choirs. On feast days, rumors float easier when sugar is in the air. I seed my narrative early with small edible truths. The linen order took at last. I'll sit up with it by the door, said where 6 ears can borrow the phrase for later. When someone tries a sharper story, it catches on that sentence and blunts itself. And just shame. I've learned to hand out a fig where a lie is about to bloom. Sweetness and timing can prune a hedge of thorns. Vespers arrives wearing gold and trouble. Crowds thin, lamps thicken, and curfew remembers its job. My exit is a practiced braid, The long way past watchmen, the quick pause at the shrine, the noisier street over the pretty one. If a reveller insists on being interesting, I answer with geography. Step into the orbit of a vendor who knows my name and the price of my patience. A watchman's nod is the quietest escort. I collect nods the way others collect ribbons. Sometimes dances tilt unruly at the square's edge. I keep a rule. If my feet must move, they move where women's hands can catch them. Circle dances with married friends are a roof. Solo steps in the shadows are a hole. The beguines make the best chaperones. Their laughter feels like law that forgives. I've learned to clap like a bell. Bright, unarguable, ending things politely. A clean ending is a kind of virtue. It saves explanations later. Fairs tempt with backroom bargains, and that's where parish fines grow teeth. I buy public, refuse special prices, and ask for witness even on a spool of thread. Write her name, I tell the clerk, so my rent knows where this coin went. If the seller balks, I try a proverb. A clean deal survives rain. If he still balks, I let him keep both the thread and the story he hoped to tell about me. Silence is expensive. I prefer receipts. Crowds are either armor or snare depending on where you stand. I choose thresholds with light and people who like me because I fed their mornings and mended their sleeves. I carry a joke in one pocket and a small mercy in the other, two habits that turn strangers into audience, audience into neighbors, neighbors into a net. The city is a loom. Festival days pull new threads. I try to pass through without snagging, leaving only the soft evidence of beeswax on my cuffs. When the last bell tilts the day into a bowl, I walk home with bread warm enough to talk and a candle stub that has earned its rest. My door greets me with our old refrain, click, ordinary, and I set the loaf where the lane can smell proof of virtue cooling. I taste the evening for leftover sharpness and swallow it with mint. Tomorrow will be quieter and trickier, not trumpets and garlands, but letters, messengers, and the kind of words that knock softly and try to live in your house rent-free. Shall we practice how to answer those without opening more than the envelope? A letter is a guest that arrives before you can count chairs. I hear the knock, 2 knuckles, brisk, and already the room shifts its weight. I wipe my hands, set my spindle where it can witness, and open the door just enough for daylight to do the first reading. Messengers love a threshold. Thresholds love rules. I take the note with my palm turned outward so the lane can see paper, not secrets. For women living alone in the Middle Ages, the letter isn't the risk. The unsupervised silence is. I read nothing with the door shut. If the clerk's boy waits, I read aloud the way the market reads prices. From Thomas the Fuller, requiring thread by Tuesday, witnessed by John the Cheeseman. If it's syrup a friend desires an evening word, I let the honey meet air. Honey stiffens in public. Gossip courts thrive on the space between eyes and ink. I keep that space as thin as a breath. The boy carries back not just my answer, but the manner of it, and manners purchase safety. Seals speak a dialect of keys and locks, so I study wax like a locksmith studies teeth. A guild stamp earns the table, a smudged crest with no clerks, hand earns the doorstep, and my slow voice. Return with the guild mark and my neighbor Maud to hear it. Men hate being asked for witnesses when romance is what they ordered. Romance rarely survives a listener. I keep a box for respectable letters and a basket for kindling. Most poetry heats soup, better than it heats life. When a beguine brings news, I fetch a second stool and let the street count compassion. Their letters are tidy, patron lists, prayer requests, the sort of ink that smells of bread. We read together, aloud, and pin the paper by the door where daylight can memorize it. The beguines taught me to harvest safety from paper by making it communal. What many eyes have already chewed cannot choke you later. Beguines are guardianship written in wool. Sometimes a man sends a note so thoughtful it trips itself. I will call after curfew. Keep your lamp. My lamp keeps me. It does not keep him. I answer at once, with the watchman still within hearing. Trade calls in daylight. and so do friends. The watchman smirks, which is approval in his language. If a note insists on night, I insist on a market bench, and the cloth seller's elbow for witness. Lovers dislike scales. I meet them under brass. Bad letters don't need ripping, they need audience. I read the worst ones under the bakehouse lintel where flour baptizes everything. To the woman at the oak door. And I let the line hang while the peel man raises an eyebrow that can shave a rumour. Shame is cheaper than parish fines and more nutritious. By evening, the author learns his handwriting is now a neighbourhood proverb, and he goes to ground like a scolded cat. There are letters that heal, and I honour them with ceremony. A widow thanks me for a night's shelter, and encloses a sprig of rosemary. I answer with a neat hand, seal it with my spindle, and send it by the midwife who carries goodwill like yeast. A guild elder praises a delivery. I copy the line into my ledger so the church courts can find it later when they come sniffing for idleness. Paper can be a pantry. Store dignity where mice can gnaw it. Messengers themselves are their own alphabet. The sacristan's nephew walks like a comma. Pause built in, and I trust him with coin. Tanner's boy smells of lie and impatience. I trust him with nothing but speed. I pay fairly and publicly, asking them to repeat my words as if they were scripture. Tell him Tuesday at noon, door ajar, witness welcome. Repetition drills, truth into bone. Watchman over here, and become part of the grammar. If a summons arrives, thin Latin wearing a fat seal, I don't feed it fear. I fetch my ledgers, 2 neighbours, and a proverb. We read it together at the fountain. We don't let it read me alone at my table. Then I carry it like a loaf. Visible, ordinary, more hunger than drama. Paper bullies retreat from daylight in plurals. We received, we will attend. The gossip courts borrow our we, and half my work is done. There's an art to refusing without inviting revenge. Your words honoured my door honours daylight. I'll write, or I keep weekdays for bread, Sundays for God, and nights for sleep. I sign with my tidy mark and the names of 2 women who saw me signed. A refusal with witnesses is a kind of yes to order, to schedule, to the small laws that keep a lane from growing teeth. Even men who grumble respect a calendar that could testify. Keep a script for doorstep talkers who try to move in with their mouths. Mine is simple. Broom in hand, body half turned, laughter ready. Walk with me to the market if it's urgent. If it isn't, the bell will find us both tomorrow. The broom isn't a weapon. It's punctuation. Once I swept a very fine boot off my stone with it. The boot's owner brought me a decent apology and 3 yards of good linen. No sword has earned me so much cloth. At day's end, I tuck good letters in a coffer that smells of wax and patience, and bad ones under the grate where they can improve themselves as heat. My door does its evening verb, click, and the room sighs the way it does when paper has behaved. Tomorrow we'll open a different envelope. Coin. Rent, sure it is, the quiet math that lets a woman secure her room with arithmetic instead of someone else's surname. If you've ever wanted to watch a ledger out-argue a loud man, bring your candle. We'll teach numbers to stand where nerves would wobble. Coin looks small until it learns choreography. I stack mine where sunlight can count it, then move 3 piles the way a beetle moves beads. Rent, fuel, witnesses. Rent buys walls, yes, but paid publicly. It also buys a rumour that behaves. I schedule my payment for the hour the watchman change rounds, greet the landlord by name, and say the sum aloud so the lane can memorize it. For women living alone in the Middle Ages, a receipt is a kind of keys and locks you can carry in your mouth. I like my landlords dull. A man who loves paper more than drama is a blessing with boots. We meet under a saint or over a scale. I read the amount twice. He scratches his mark, and we both pretend to enjoy the smell of ink. If his clerk forgets a tally, I produce mine. Wax tally stick, a neighbour's nod. Numbers are loyal if you feed them. When church courts sniff for debt, I let my ledger wag its tail. They prefer barking dogs. Surety is simply a promise with witnesses. I keep a small circle, begin midwife, fruit seller, who will speak my steadiness in exchange for the same. We sign one another's small storms, illness, a late supply cart, a broken loom. No one flames out because the group lends a week of patience like a shawl. Respectability rules adore this cross-stitch of names. It convinces the town that I belong without owning me. Guardianship, yes, but chosen, braided, revocable. The rent itself, I treat like a procession. Coin first, then a loaf, then a word about repairs, said kindly, where the fountain can overhear. Landlords are human. Praise the hinge before you ask about the draft. When a shutter sticks, I bring a carpenter's cousin and pay him in bread and good noise. 2 men fixing my window at noon reads, maintenance, not mystery. And gossip courts hate losing a headline to common sense. I save small capital where thieves in despair can't find it, in favours prepaid. A winter's wood bought early at market, and stored in a neighbour's shed with both families' marks. Lamp oil pooled with a widow, so our flames fail together, or not at all. Grain purchased with the miller's wife, because buyers in pairs are boring to cheats. Dull women sleep, that's my joke and my policy. Dull women also survive thin months without pawning their dignity. Some landlords test edges. Pay at dusk, he suggests. My clerk is free then. Dusk is where stories multiply. I counter with morning bells and a borrowed bench. Let the clerk meet me under St. Mildred where the scales live. If he insists on night, I insist on audience. Watchman within earshot, a neighbour on the step. Bread on the basket as decoy propriety. Predators dislike picnics they didn't plan. He remembers daylight next quarter. I keep 2 purses. One of coin, one of crumbs. The coin pays rent on schedule. The crumb purse pays for interruptions. 1 loaf to the man who fixed the hinge before rain, raisins for the boy who ran a message faster than malice, apples for the clerk who stamped my paper without sighing. Call it tipping if you like. I call it oil for gears I don't own. The city runs on this discreet generosity. Parish fines often start where gratitude failed to show up on time. Debt happens. Pride can't be the treasurer. When I owe plainly. I post a neat line. 2 pence to Maud for thread, due McCormus, where the lane reads everything it would prefer to invent. Then I pay early, if breath allows. Public debt shrinks. Secret debt breeds. I learned that from a tanner who hid arrears under jokes, until jokes turned into locks. His door sings a different click now, the kind that sounds like curfew without bells. Security deposits. Our little medieval dragons guard against surprise. I surrender a token at lease signing, a spoon of silver or a length of good linen. But I demand a matching token from the landlord, a written promise about leaks and shutters, signed where the saint can frown at us both. If he balks, I tell a proverb loudly. A clean deal survives rain. Proverbs are old lawyers. Crowds love to watch them argue. Insurance, in my town, looks like bread and names. If the oven cracks or the river sulks, I have 3 pre-arranged trades that keep soup honest for a fortnight. Mending for barley, washing for onions, night-sitting for oil. We rehearsed these before we needed them, because emergencies are poor dance teachers. The Beguines keep a ledger of mercy. I keep mine lighter, but aligned. When disaster grazes the lane, we distribute shame-proof errands instead of charity that stings. What about saving? I save in 3 currencies. Coin, reputation, and routine. Coin lives double-wrapped in wax inside a coffer that complains when opened. Reputation lives in the mouths of 5 women who like how I measure. Routine lives in the sound of my latch at predictable hours. Lose one and the others cushion you. Lose 2 and the third becomes stubborn on your behalf. Lose all 3 and even clean hands look like excuses. Once a year I rehearse my exit. Not because I plan to flee, but because knowledge is a calmer roommate than fear. I pack the rain bag, seal, tally, rent receipt, the good needle, a ribbon with a memory in it, and walk the route to the guild and the begins by daylight, then by lamplight. Doors that could open, benches that would welcome, faces that would speak. Practice leaving makes staying feel like a decision, not a trap. Tomorrow we'll spend some of that confidence in a more expensive currency. Truth told against a liar, and the quiet weapons that keep a woman's name from becoming tinder. The first rule of lies is that they need darkness and hurry. So when a neighbor's mouth ran faster than her sense, whispering that my lamp burned late for reasons other than bread, I slowed everything down. I opened my door wider than usual, let the street count my stitches, and read my ledger aloud as if it were a psalm. Gossip courts hate daylight. They prefer fog. I gave them a clear noon and a broom-swept threshold where rumors looked foolish trying to tiptoe. I've learned to sort malice from misunderstanding by the sound of footsteps. Misunderstanding shuffles. Malice marches. When it's the latter, I do not duel in alleys. I write a neat notice, names, dates, the sentence spoken, and pin it under the saint on the church porch where paper grows spines. Church courts respect ink that behaves in public. I stand by the notice after Mass, hands quiet, face plainer than porridge, so the town sees I brought a match and water, not oil. Oaths are tools, not fireworks. I choose my oath helpers the way a cook chooses herbs, few, fresh, and known for their virtue. The midwife, a beggin, and the fruit seller swear to my hours and my lamp's manners. We speak together under the clerk's nose, each phrase clear as brass. We saw, we heard, we know. In a world where some men treat women's words like damp wood, a chorus dries the timber. Respectability rules adore a refrain. Keys and locks turn into little witnesses if you let them. On the table I lay them out. Coffer, pantry, trunk, naming what each guards and when it sleeps. I describe my door's evening click like a habit learned by heart, because it is. The watchmen nod. They've heard that click. A house with a vocabulary is harder to slander. Every hinge has a line to speak, and lies stammer when furniture interrupts. I do not answer venom with silence. I answer with schedule. Tuesday, I spun at the threshold. Wednesday, I paid rent at the fountain. Thursday, I walked with the beguine to the bakehouse. I recite the week until even the beetle yawns. Boredom is my favorite weapon. No splash, only depth. Parish vines thrive on drama. They wither in routine. If I must kneel, I kneel as if counting stitches. Repentance can resemble industry from the doorway. Men sometimes offer to fix slander with fists. I prefer repairs that don't crack bones. I invite the loudest neighbor to sit in my doorway for an hour of spinning. Her chair, my spindle. The street watches us trade quiet. Lies hate proximity. They breathe better across fences. By the time the bell turns the lane toward Vespers, we have woven an armistice tight as thread. If not friendship, then at least fatigue. When spite upgrades itself to summons, I bring arithmetic. Rent receipts, tallies. The clerks stamp from yesterday's delivery. I lay them like stones in a ford, so the court must step exactly where I wish. Guardianship can be paper as much as people. A beguine reads one line, the midwife another, the watchman a third. Together, the sentences lift like a bridge. She keeps hours. She paid here. Her lamp was seen. Enough. There is a narrow trick I love, turning a lie into a proverb that scolds its author. I repeat her slander calmly, in places where laughter lives. Bakehouse line, nut stall, fountain, and then I add a tale. And bread rises better when it's watched. The room chooses which half to keep. Within a day, the tale returns to its maker, with that tale gnawing. Gossip courts can be persuaded to hunt the hunter if you seed the joke just right. Sometimes the liar wants spectacle. I answer with inventory. I read my cupboard as if it were scripture. 1 loaf, 2 onions, tallow, vinegar, rosemary. I hold up the apron and the comb, show the basin by the hearth, point to the stool by the door where I sit. When men call so the lane can count silhouettes. Objects behave better than tempers. They tell the only romance I can afford. I make room for mercy without making room for nonsense. If the mouth that wronged me trembles, I offer the cleanest exit. Say you guessed. Say you were tired. Say you spoke out of turn where the saint can hear. We do it together, a small penance that saves us both. Widows have taught me this softness. They have buried louder remedies and found them too heavy to carry home. Mercy is thrift of the soul. And still, there are days when the lie staggers on. That's when I move my life half a step closer to witnesses, work more often in the threshold, walk the well-lit road, even if it is longer, schedule deliveries exactly on the bell. It costs time, but it buys weather. The town inhales a steadier version of me until the gust forgets what it was trying to uproot. I cannot control mouths. I can control my outline. When it finally quiets, I don't gloat. I check the hinges. I send a loaf to the loud neighbor's door with a note that says, "For the morning." Bread remembers who it has silenced. Then I polish the key and rehearse our refrain. Click, ordinary click, because peace is maintenance, not luck. Tomorrow will meet a different kind of risk, the one that wears pity like perfume. Charitable men with strings, offers that smell like debt, and the art of saying yes to help without letting anyone move into your spine. Ready to practice that smile that accepts the coin and refuses the leash. Charity arrives wearing two faces, bread with clean hands and coin with a leash. I've learned to tell them apart by temperature. Honest help is warm the way a fresh loaf warms fingers. Entanglement is warm, like a pocket where a hand lingers too long. When a man offers assistance at the doorstep, I shift the scene into daylight and witnesses. Bench by the fountain, my basket open, my spindle turning. For women living alone in the Middle Ages, location is negotiation. Move the conversation 3 steps and you've already trimmed 3 strings. Parish alms are a choreography, not a miracle. I take mine rarely and publicly, standing under the saint while the sacristan scratches names. I say what the loaf is for: fuel short, fever weak, broken hinge. And I say it where gossip courts must choose between repeating my words or inventing better ones. Parish, fines, hunt, secrets. Alms given like weather are boring prey. When I have surplus, an extra heel, a second onion, I reverse the river. Because generosity that moves both ways silences accountants who count only inward. Patronage is trickier. It speaks Latin and smiles. A merchant's clerk praises my thread and offers regular orders with payment after delivery. That is debt dressed for Sunday. I answer with brass. Half down at the scale, half at the stamp, witnesses with elbows. If he balks, I let him try a poorer spinner who will cost him more in rumours than I do in coin. Respectability rules love arithmetic. I feed them sums, not size. My door isn't for sale. My schedule sometimes is. Sometimes help arrives as protection with paperwork. Guardianship by another name. Put your name under my roof, says an uncle-shaped man, and no one will question your lamp. They will question it differently. I keep my own name on the rent and borrow guardianship by the cupful. The midwife on my left arm, a beguine on my right, a watchman nodding from the corner. 3 small shields are safer than 1 large yoke. If a protector cannot be returned to the shelf neatly, he isn't protection, he's furniture with opinions. Gifts that must be thanked in private are traps. I've learned to thank with bread, publicly, or not at all. Coin slipped at curfew earns daylight repayment. Your loan kept my fire. Here is your change, and Maud heard me say so. I say it loud enough for shutters. The street becomes my receipt. The giver's vanity becomes my ledger. Rooms with witnesses stay breathable. Rooms without them grow teeth. Keys and locks keep doors. Voices keep doors honest. The best help is infrastructural, boring, repeatable, seen. The miller's wife and I pool coin for grain, because bulk buys dull rumors. The baker and I trade scraps for crumbs, so neither oven nor purse burns. I keep an emergency exchange written on wax. Mending for barley, washing for oil, night sitting for wood. Rehearsed aid doesn't flirt. It functions. When church courts sniff for impropriety, they smell soup and schedules and wander off to find a better story. I've met men who offer charity as theatre. They want gratitude that bows. I give gratitude that balances accounts. Your gift bought hinges. Your name is written on the paper beside them. When he returns for a performance, I point to the hinge and open and close it until the conversation squeaks away. Objects can testify better than tired mouths. A hinge that swings smooth is an ally. A coin that expects applause is an unpaid landlord. Women's networks keep me solvent and sane. Widows make weather maps of generosity. Who lends without counting, who counts without lending, and we travel those isobars like sailors. A beguine will hold a debt in silence and mercy. A merchant's wife will hold it in her mouth till a feast day. I place my weight where straw won't break. When I must borrow, I borrow where returning the favor looks like work. Night watch at a sick bed. Extra skein spun by the door. Errands run in shoes that know the route. Refusing help needs its own politeness. I don't slap hands. I redirect them. I thread in daylight at the guild table. Your kindness will weigh better there. Or, bring your wife. Her eye is stronger than mine. If he insists on privacy, I insist on prices written and read aloud. Predators dislike paperwork. If he mutters that I'm proud, I quote a proverb under the saint. Pride spends dear. So does debt. Proverbs are old spears. They pierce softly but deeply. There are weeks when the river runs the wrong way. Fever, leak, a lost order, and even good systems groan. On those days I choose my exposure, like a surgeon chooses instruments. I stand in the bakehouse line and say, bread short in my house. I will pay with mending and calm. Calm is a currency. People invest in it. The man slips me a loaf smaller than usual, which is dignity's discount. I pay him back with sleeves that don't embarrass his wife at mass. Help that preserves face is help I'll advertise. A warning I give the young, beware pity delivered as privacy, says a soft voice at the door. Nobody needs to know. Everybody needs to know a different version, one that keeps you clean. I keep a rule. No gift enters my house that my house cannot say aloud. I test every kindness with the same instrument I test stews, vinegar. If it curdles in public, it wasn't food. Gossip courts are cruel, yes. They are also quality control you can learn to use without loving. When the ledger is balanced and the breath has slowed, I clean my bowl, oil the hinge, and practice the click we've taught this door. Ordinary, ordinary. Help should make that sound too. If it changes the pitch, I return it, repackaged, as thanks that doesn't owe tomorrow. Then I set aside a little coin and a little mercy for the nights when the city forgets itself. Fights, fires, flood, and the right kind of help is a hand you already trained. Tomorrow we'll walk into that smoke. Alarms, buckets, neighbors with more courage than sense, and how to keep your name dry when the street turns to water. The alarm never sounds like you expect. Sometimes it's the watchman's rattle, sometimes a bell that can't find its note, sometimes only smoke behaving like a rumor under the door. I keep the rain bag by the coffer, seal, tallies, a ribbon with courage tied into it, and I practice grabbing it the way other people practice prayers. Keys and locks first, ledger under the arm where a foolish heart used to live, then the door with our old refrain. Click, ordinary, only faster. For women living alone in the Middle Ages, speed has to look like choreography, not panic. Outside disaster looks busy and stupid at once. Barks jumping streets like boys who skipped catechism. Buckets moving hand to hand. A mother counting children with her mouth, not her fingers. I step into the bucket line where the watchman can see my elbows earning their keep. Respectability rules don't vanish in smoke. They just change uniforms. Work is the best veil you'll ever own. If my skirt catches a cinder, I laugh first and beat it out second. Humor makes other people remember instructions. I keep a script for orders. You fetch from the fountain. You hold the door. I count. Counting steadies the street. 5 buckets down, 1 up. Swap hands before blisters choose for you. I say names. Maud, John, Beggin, so the line can feel itself become a rope. Guardianship isn't just a man with a staff. It's 40 hands pretending to be one long arm. I don't shout, "Save my house." I shout, "Save the lane," because my door is only virtuous if the street keeps its face. The Beguines are always first with sense. One opens their gate, and the cloister turns into triage. Bread on one table, cloth on the other, a pot that refuses to panic. I send lodgers there with the rain bag, and a lie ready for any clerk who frowns. We were counting blankets for the parish. Church courts are suspicious of improvisation. The trick is to name it inventory. Widows learn this fluency early. It's cheaper than fines later. Floods are slower but meaner. Water wears a quiet face and then climbs your ankle like a creditor. I wedge the door, lift the trunk on bricks, and speak to the room like an old horse. Up, steady now. The fountain that kept us honorable turns traitor, and curfew becomes a joke told by the river. Still, patterns save people. We move the same way we do in fire. Names, tasks, visible arithmetic. One neighbor watches children, another watches doors. I watch the line where water explains what it wants. Never let heroics steal more than they repay. I will not run into a burning house for linen. I will for the ledger. Linen can be earned twice. Ledgers speak when my throat is smoke. The only other thing I rescue is the comb, because arriving at the Beguines, looking like a singed story, invites the wrong kind of attention. Even in Ash, gossip courts pass sentences. Suited, yes. Disheveled, no. It isn't vanity, it's legal strategy. When the flames finally choose boredom, and the water chooses a new street to misunderstand, the aftermath begins to count us. I gather names the way other women gather eggs. Who slept where? Which child is wearing whose shoes, whose bread we owe for mercy? I make the list aloud under the saint, so the town can own it with me. If parish fines go hunting later, why were you out after bell? I will hand them a chorus, because the lane needed legs. Each disaster teaches furniture to speak. I log repairs before men with hammers appear. Hinge readjusted, shutter repinned, lintel scrubbed with vinegar, until it remembers who it is. Then I stand the broom in the doorway bristles up, which is the sign our street reads as, "We're mending, not mourning." Watchmen swagger by, relieved to see order wearing an apron. I thank them with a heel of bread, and not a lecture. Their memory of my gratitude is a shield I can borrow later. Do not forget thieves. Smoke draws them like flies to jam. I keep the key looped through my belt while I pass buckets, so I can feel iron against skin. A stranger touches my latch. I call him cousin, loud enough for 3 neighbors to inherit the joke. Thieves hate kinships invented on the spot. Respectability rules do the rest. Nobody wants to be caught stealing from a woman whose wardrobe is a town's memory. When dawn finds us, I stage the audit. Stools out, cloth on the windowsill, ledger open where anyone can read the story we survived. Who worked, who sheltered, who owes. I never accuse in the morning. I label. John has my kettle. Jones boy, my blanket. Labels spare tempers and feed results. The Beguines cross-check like kind sergeants. The midwife counts bruises and makes jokes rude enough to scare pain back into itself. Humor is our other bucket. There is always one mouth that scolds while hands loaf. I employ it. Stand there and tell the bells where to ring if there's a next time. It will, and loudly. And now we have an alarm that doesn't sleep. Even church courts respect a town that can explain its own rescue. I copy the plan into my ledger, where gravel will be piled, whose roof will eat water, who owns the longest rope, so next season's panic can borrow this season's discipline. By week's end, the lane smells like wet stone, sour flour, and stubborn life. I bake a little early just to let the right smoke climb the right way. Bread says, "We are still us." I replace the rain bag items one by one, polish the key, and rehearse our refrain. Click, ordinary. Then I teach the emptiest child on the street the bucket rhythm and pay him in raisins to set the beat if trouble returns. Tomorrow I'll trade ash for quiet medicine, fevers, poultices, and how to be a nurse without becoming a roomer, because fire isn't the only thing that tests a woman's outline. Illness walks softly, like a stranger who already knows your floorboards. When a cough starts to argue with the night, I shift the room before it shifts my name. The bed moves near the hearth, but never greedy for heat. The stool goes to the threshold so the lane can see care, not secrecy. I lay out basin, cloth, vinegar, honey, and my little ledger. Doses are testimony as much as remedy. For women living alone in the Middle Ages, nursing must look as honest as rent-paying. Respectability rules don't vanish when tempers rise. They just change into thermometers with opinions. First, I teach fever to live on a schedule. Cool cloths at the bells, sips between psalm and psalm, blankets aired where the street can count them. I prop the door a finger's width at midday so neighbors can smell rosemary steam and hear me read doses aloud. Watchmen nod when they pass. Curfew is less suspicious of a lamp that announces broth than of one that hoards shadows. I don't whisper remedies. I pronounce them. Our old refrain at the latch, click, ordinary, becomes the beat that tells worry to march in step. My cupboard holds a small republic of useful things. Thyme for steam, rosemary to lift, wormwood for stubborn bellies, vinegar to tidy surfaces, salt to wake a weary tongue, and honey when the throat forgets its manners. I boil cloth like a confession and cool it like mercy. Each dose gets a line in the ledger, time, amount, witness if I can borrow one. A beetle can argue with a rumor. It is harder to argue with ink that knows how to count. Keys and locks guard coffers. Numbers guard nights. I call the midwife early, not bravely late. She's the only midnight knock no one finds. If breath tightens or bleeding speaks in red authority, I add a beginning. 2 women whose reputations arrive 5 minutes before they do. We read the symptoms aloud. We pray without theatrics. And we assign tasks. I warm the water. She checks the pulse. The beguine writes, "Guardianship can be borrowed by the hour, stitched from names that carry steadiness like yeast. Church courts respect competence in plain wool." Men with bottles sometimes follow the scent of worry. A draught, discreetly taken, they say, and the word discreet stains more than it cleans. I insist on daylight, a witness, and the name of every herb in the cup. Payment happens in public, at the scale if possible. If a potion requires privacy, I prefer the patient to require soup. Secrets make poor medicine an excellent gossip. I won't pay twice. A good healer tolerates brass and benches, a bad one needs curtains. During plague seasons, we turn kindness into engineering. A sprig of rue above the lintel, a chalk mark that says, "Fever, do not visit." Bread welcome, a window crack to send thanks back down the rope with the loaf. I boil the jug handle as strictly as I boil rumors. Neighbors leave food and jokes at the sill. I answer with mended sleeves and a note pinned where eyes behave better than mouths. Quarantine done honestly is charity that travels both directions. Cleanliness must be visible to count. I change linen more than pride wants, and less than a queen could boast. Then let the clothesline testify in the sun, shifts like little flags of innocence. I wash hands in the doorway, so the street can see lye soap doing penance on my knuckles. Widows taught me this theatre. Dirt is forgivable. Hidden dirt invites parish vines with sharp quills. Airing is half the cure, for lungs and reputations both. Food is an argument with despair. Thin broth at first, then thicker with barley, a posset when the moans grow modest, apple stewed for peace. I count spoons like a tithe, one for strength, one for stubbornness, one because we believe in tomorrow. The ledger eats alongside the patient. Entries for what went down, who saw, and when the pot was refreshed. If coin runs low, I write owing and read it at the fountain later. Debts admitted in daylight stay small enough to carry. Visitors get managed like doses, measured, timed, and never in the dark. I keep a stool at the threshold for brief prayers and brisk blessings, hands touched through cloth, not over the bed. A man who insists on private consolation meets my broom and my proverb. Comfort is a public word. The neighborhood watches the choreography. Door ajar, voices low, laughter aloud, and understands. This house keeps sorrow neat. Gossip courts prefer mess. I give them nothing to spill. I keep piety honest and charms humble. A candle burns beneath the saint because it learns to. A ribbon ties around the bedpost because my grandmother swore it calmed a frightened heart. I never let a charm talk louder than the poultice. If a clerk raises an eyebrow, I show him the dose ledger first and the ribbon second. Faith is best served on a plate of evidence. Even church courts digest it more kindly that way. Recovery needs as much choreography as crisis. When the fever breaks, I open the shutter, a hand's breadth to let the lanes smell the broth cooling. I thank aloud the names that stood my vigil, midwife, beguine, widow, and I repay with mending that week, whether or not they ask. Public gratitude spends like coin and redeems like bread. It also teaches the town what kind of help fits my door, seen, steady, and free of strings. And when care fails, because sometimes it does, we let dignity be the last medicine. I send for the priest early, the carpenter before the last breath, and the women who know how to wash a body without scraping a soul. We keep the vigil lamp small, we keep the door polite, and we keep the ledger open so estate and memory can be sorted before tears blur the columns. Tomorrow I'll walk you through that harder room, wills, burial fees, the ethics of mourning in public. So grief can move like a procession instead of an ambush. I keep my will where my needle sleeps, close, honest, reachable in the dark. Death is a neighbor who never knocks. Better to have the table laid. My version is plain. 2 shirts to the beguines, the better comb to the midwife, the coffer to a cousin, if she keeps the rent, and 3 candles paid for the souls that kept my door steady. For women living alone in the Middle Ages, writing a will isn't morbid. It's housekeeping. I read it aloud to 2 women under the saint, and let them watch the seal cool, so the paper learns their faces as well as my name. When illness starts speaking in red authority or breath shortens like a stingy clerk, I send for witnesses early. The midwife sits at my left, the fruit seller at my right, and we turn the room into a lawful prayer. The parish clerk loves signatures more than tears. I feed him the former and keep the latter for the night. I state debts and favours like ingredients. 1 loaf owed here, 2 ells of mending there, so no one has to cook a quarrel from grief after I go. Respectability rules are never more hungry than at a deathbed. We must serve them plain food. Burial fees wait on the threshold like polite wolves. Shroud, pit, bell, priest, and sometimes a small bribe for the grave digger's back. I keep a narrow purse marked earth for that day. When coin runs lean, I've already arranged mercy. The beguines wave the procession if I've mended for them. The sacristan sells me a cheaper corner if I've kept my pew unnoisy, and the watchmen carry the board for the price of bread. Parish fines can sprout from funerals, lamps too late, wails too theatrical, ale in the wrong hands. So I write a short script for the living and pin it to the door. The body needs washing, not spectacle. Water warmed with rosemary tells the room this is care, not gossip. I lay the comb and the ribbon nearby because the dead deserve tidy endings. I leave the shutter cracked so the lane can witness reverence instead of invention. Keys and locks become punctuation. Coffer closed, Door ajar, heart steady. The Beguines know how to fold a sheet so sorrow doesn't snag. I follow their hands and let my tears be small and scheduled. Grief that moves like a procession won't be fined for loitering. Fund. I choose my pallbearers the way I choose witnesses. Women who walk like statements. Men who owe me small bread debts they're happy to pay with shoulders. We keep to the daylight road, where the church courts can count our steps, and the gossip courts must pretend to be devotional. If a loud cousin wants a torchlit parade, I point at the bell and the watchman and say, "The curfew keeps better time than you. Night belongs to fear and fines. Sorrow walks best at noon." The grave itself is a ledger line. I pay the fee in exact coin with the names of my witnesses folded beneath, so no clerk can invent interest later. A small wooden cross, a scrap of linen, a sprig of rue. It doesn't need grandeur. It needs clarity. Widows taught me to bring bread for the digger's hands and vinegar for the shovel. Both keep the work from turning into rumour. We speak the simple words, and then we tidy the ground the way we tidy a table. Crumbs swept into the generous earth. Mourning clothes are not costumes. They're contracts. I wear dark wool that says, "I won't be entertaining without requiring me to explain it to every mouth in town." Veil low for the first week, then higher, so I can see where the rent is coming from. A woman alone doesn't always have the luxury of collapsing. Instead, I give grief a schedule. Psalm at dawn, letter at noon, bread at dusk, sleep under witness. Those who pity me most loudly are often the least useful after. I anchor myself to women who bring broth and a broom. A will is more than bequests. It's a map out of later quarrels. Itemize like a merchant. Trunk to Joan if she keeps the house. Linen to Maud with thanks and a note of the mending already promised. Spindle to the cousin who can use it without turning it into a relic. I name a guardian for my tools, not my soul. The midwife, who owes nobody obedience but God and her experience. Guardianship written this way keeps men from counting my things like trophies and lets the work find hands that respect it. And then there are the ones who come sniffing, distant kin, neighbors with opinions, clerks with fresh ink. I greet them at the threshold with a stool they may not cross and a ledger they may read. Here are the bequests. Here are the witnesses. Here is the rent paid. The broom leans in sight. The door remains a hand's breadth open, and my voice stays ordinary. Creditors of grief prefer curtains and whispers. I give them benches and verbs. If they threaten church courts, I offer to meet them there with the Beguines. Vets don't like a calendar. After burial, I do not throw my sorrow into the street. I stitch it into seams. I mend for the midwife. I carry wood for a widow older than mine. I bake small loaves for the watchman who counted my steps without comment. Public gratitude is the antidote to public pity. It turns the village's gaze from my weakness to our weaving, and leaves less room for mouthy saints who love to find the living for mourning imperfectly. I let a child ring my bell once so he can say later, "I helped her." Give the town true lines to repeat. If I inherit instead of lose, I hold the gift with clean hands. A room, a chest, a spindle, each comes with ghosts and gossip. I pay whatever tiny tax the parish asks with more grace than it deserves, then invite 2 women to watch me unlock the new coffer. Keys must introduce themselves to witnesses, or they start thinking they're secrets. I fold the old life into the new like egg into dough, gently, firmly, no air pockets for rumour to rise in. The watchman noticed the same lamp at the same hour. Continuity is courage in work clothes. And when the ache loosens its teeth enough to chew bread again, I light a candle the size of a thumb and let it burn down while I read my will out loud once more. This time as a rehearsal for living. What do I want spoken of me if the door clicks and does not open again? She kept hours, she paid in daylight, she fed the lane when it forgot itself. That's the epitaph I practice with deeds. Tomorrow I'll turn from funerals to futures, licenses, road letters, and how a woman can cross a county line without leaving her good name behind. If you're ready, we'll pack a small bag and teach the world to read our steps as plainly as it reads our seals. Before I leave a town, I rehearse my return. I set the room to orderly absence. Stool tipped against the table. Breadcrumb trail of favours prepaid. A note pinned under the saint naming where to send word if the road sneezes me sideways. Keys and locks don't travel, but their meanings do. I wear the door's confidence on my belt in the form of tidy papers. For women living alone in the Middle Ages, motion without preparation looks like vagrancy. Motion with a plan looks like work. I prefer to be read as work. My kit is small, specific, and boring on purpose. Road letter from the parish warden stating who I am and why the next town should let me breathe there. Guild chit proving I sell thread rather than stories. A debt tally, zeroed thank you. So no clerk can claim I ran from coin. 2 witness names that carry weight beyond the county line. The midwife and a beggin. Guardianship without a leash. Church courts don't have to like my independence. They just need to recognize it in their handwriting. I travel on market eves when watchmen are most alert and thieves are laziest. Too many elbows. Not enough shadows. My feet keep curfew's rhythm even on the road. Leave after prime. Arrive before vespers. Lamps lit where lamps are legal. I carry a basket with the mouth open and my business written in it. Skeins to sell. Mending to deliver. Bread wrapped in honest cloth. Respectability rules a door. Props that speak for you while your face rests. At the gate, I let the porter measure me with boredom. I offer my letter first and a proverb second. A clean errand survives rain. He laughs because I say it like I mean it. I do, and stamps my chit with a thumb that smells of onions. If he asks who vouches for me, I offer names he already respects. The midwife's cousin, a sacristan's niece. People who collect tithes of trust rather than coin. Watchmen like patterns. My pattern is woman with destinations. Inns are the city's mood swings. I choose ones with visible ledgers, benches near the door, and a landlady who has learned to smile without volunteering her soul. I pay for a pallet in a common room, rather than a bargain privacy, that buys me trouble later. When the ale turns mouths loose, I turn my stool toward the fire and mend in public. Gossip courts travel too. The stable boy's tongue can undo a careful week. I let him carry away a story about my hem rather than my hours. I eat the road the way I eat soup, in small, known bites. Pilgrim badges pinned where eyes can count them help, even when I'm not strictly on pilgrimage. The symbol teaches strangers an old grammar for leave me be. I trade songs for space when carts bunch. Clean verses with familiar saints. And I learn the names of ferrymen the way other people learn prayers. On bad days I walk inside other people's errands. A butterwoman's clatter, a tinker's tune, a beggin's plain-voiced psalm. Borrowed company, returned with thanks. Toll bridges love confusion, so I bring clarity already folded. I lay coin and letter side by side, and I say my route aloud for the ledger's benefit. From St. Mildred's parish to the south gate of home for the market of linen. Numbers behave better when spoken. If a tollman makes his fee a little taller than the charter, I measure him with silence, and then with witnesses. A queue is a choir. I enlist it. Sir, shall we all pay the festival rate in Lent? Laughter has a way of resetting scales. Night stops require choreography, not courage. I choose the church porch over the alehouse shadows if the gate is shut early. A small candle, a large yawn, and the road letter folded like a pillow under my cheek. These turn pity into guardianship. In the morning, I donate the candle stub, not because I'm saintly, but because sacristans keep score in ways that help when your name needs a nudge. Parish vines look for excuses. I give them receipts. The countryside carries different dangers. Dogs that speak only in teeth, men who think alone. Means unclaimed. Weather that argues louder than priests. I pack vinegar not only for washing, but for waking the faint, and a length of red thread that helps me count my pulse when fear drinks my numbers. I also carry 2 jokes, one for the honest man who worries too much, one for the dishonest man who pretends to worry for my sake. Humor is a hinge that turns a door without breaking it. If I must refuse an escort that feels more like an inventory, I do it where the witness density is high, ford, ferry, or crossroads shrine. Thank you. I'll walk in the beguine's shadow, I say, even if their shadow is 3 miles wide. Men with designs prefer lanes without saints or boatmen. I've learned to point at the horizon, like an appointment is waiting for me there. Appointments are lighter than swords, and almost as persuasive. Business on the road is the reason I'm allowed to have a road. I carry sample skeins and a short list of prices written in a hand that doesn't blush. I say them aloud for church courts I can't see, hemming by the ell, spinning by the ounce. If I take an order, I take it under a tree I can name, and with a witness I can thank later. Payment in halves, as always, mercy for delays written in, greed written out. My trade is my passport. I stamp it with punctuality. I keep receipts where weather can't steal them. A wax tablet tucked in a wooden case, blotted with names and simple arithmetic. If the summoner in the next town decides to harvest fines from strangers, I hand him my week like a loaf. Here are the hours. Here are the hands who saw them. Here is the coin that behaved. He grumbles. They always grumble. But grumbling is not a law. Returning home is a second journey with softer shoes. I arrive before Vespers, knock at my own door as if visiting, and let the lane watch me turn the key. Our old refrain, click, ordinary, rings sweeter after miles. I unpack publicly. Skeins on the table, bread on the sill for the sparrows, a greeting to the watchmen who didn't have to worry because I taught them not to. Then I pay the invisible toll. Thank yous to the names that kept me safe in their mouths while I walked. Travel teaches you who you are when nobody owns your outline. It also teaches you what you owe your street when you return. To bring back steadiness, not just goods. Tomorrow we'll spend that steadiness where it matters most and costs the most. Mentoring a younger woman into her first key, her first ledger, her first no, said with a broom and a smile. If you've ever wished someone had walked beside you the first time you turned a lock, lace your shoes. We're about to do exactly that. I remember her hand first, ink stain on the thumb, courage on the palm, and a tremor that didn't ask my permission. I set my own key in it and let the iron rest there, a heartbeat longer than comfort. Heavy? I asked. She nodded. Good, I said. Weight teaches care. For women living alone in the Middle Ages, a key is grammar, subject, verb, object, door, hand, click. We practiced that sentence 3 times before breakfast, so the lane could hear her name, learning to speak in metal. Training begins at the threshold, because thresholds are where stories hatch. I made her sweep with the door half open so gossip courts could inventory broom, bucket, and the new owner of both. Let the street watch you be ordinary, I told her, before it tries to watch you be interesting. We placed the stool near the hinge, spindle visible, accounts tablet where sunlight could read it faster than any clock. Respectability rules love a stage set they recognize. We furnished it with dull virtues until even the nosiest neighbor yawned. Next came the bell choreography, how to let curfew become a lullaby rather than a leash. We walked the timing out loud. Vespers for lamps, compline for latches, midnight for sleep that has witnesses. I taught her to greet watchmen by name without borrowing their swagger. Names are little bridges, I said. Build them in daylight and you can cross them at night. She practiced the nod that means thank you without meaning please. Paperwork was our second grammar. I drilled her in ledgers the way other women drill in hymns. Rent paid where benches listen. Tallies explained with elbows on brass. Contracts read twice, and signed once with a witness who eats at your table sometimes. When her hand hesitated, I put a beguine on her left and a midwife on her right. Guardianship that breathes, not binds. Ink, I said, tapping the page, is a polite keys and locks. Use it before you need the iron kind. Visitors were the third test. A clerk with a too clean smile asked to collect a small fee after dusk. She looked at me. I looked at the sky. The sky said no. I handed her the broom, the punctuation mark that ends sentences men write without asking. Say it like you're bored, I whispered. She did, and boredom saved her blushes. We moved the conversation to the fountain at noon, and the fee shrank to its proper size under the saint's unblinking eyes. She worried about spinsters being pitied and widows being available, as if pity and availability were seasons she couldn't resist. I gave her an apron that reads as work from 50 paces, and a joke for when pity knocks. Tell them your husband is embroidery, I said, and point at the tidy hem. Laughter is a gate with a polite latch. It opens when you want neighbors, closes when you need silence. Even church courts relax around a woman whose humor behaves like arithmetic. We practiced market optics until the basket learned its lines. Mouth open, cloth folded back, order pinned in a tidy hand. She counted coin where scales glow like sermons, not in shadows where bargains pretend they're saints. I taught her to overpay once in front of the wrong man, on purpose, to buy a witness for later when she'd underpay him in attention. The fruit seller grinned. The butcher nodded. The lane took notes. Markets are universities for respectability rules if you listen in the right aisles. Slander drills were harder. I made her write a false sentence about herself on wax, safely absurd, then made her erase it the way we erase the real kind. Notice on the porch. Names attached. Ledgers open. Work more visible than temper. Let boredom swallow it, I said. Dice invites appetite. We rehearsed oaths with the midwife and the beguine, until the three of them sounded like one bell with 3 harmonies. A liar can outrun one voice. He trips on a chorus. Nursing basics next, because fevers will test your outline more than flattery. Basin at the threshold. Cloths boiled honest. Doses read aloud, where the street can count them. If anyone offers medicine that requires a curtain, I told her, serve soup instead. She laughed, then wrote the line down as if it were scripture. Parish finds love secrecy. We starve them with rosemary steam and visible linen. Care that can be seen is care that can testify. We walked to fire lanes and flood routes until her feet knew where the buckets live and which roof eats water best. I taught her the bucket rhythm, the inventory voice, the way to say, "Who will walk me to the corner?" like a bell that assumes answers. Neighbors will carry a young woman farther than any uncles will. She learned to pay them back in bread and mending, the ancient currencies that never devalue. Courage, I said, is teamwork wearing your face. Money tutelage was plain bread with a crisp crust. 2 purses, coin and crumbs. The coin pays rent on schedule. The crumb purse oils hinges that don't belong to you. Messengers, peelmen, porters. Dull women sleep, I told her, our little leitmotif, and she repeated it with a smile that meant she understood. We wrote a rehearsal will, just a sketch, so she'd know where her tools would go if the bell rang wrong. Order if mercy you give the living ahead of time. In the end, I gave her 1 rule and 3 scripts. Rule: never let a stranger decide how your door sounds. Script 1 for curiosity. You're welcome in daylight. Bring a witness with elbows. Script 2 for kindness. Your help will weigh best at the scale. Bring coin there. Script 3 for danger. She practiced until the door learned her hand, as it had mine. The lane listened, approved, and exhaled. When she finally kept a night alone, I slept badly and smiled anyway. Dawn found her broom by the hinge, her ledger open to ordinary sums, her basket with a heel of bread cooling under clean cloth. She met me at the fountain with the unremarkable glory I wanted most. Nothing to explain. I kissed her forehead like an aunt, and bought onions I didn't need, simply to mark the day. Tomorrow I'll show her, and you, the last, most dangerous craft. How to carry freedom into old age without becoming the tale people sharpen at twilight. Age doesn't arrive. It accumulates, like dust in good corners, and polish on the places you touch most. I knew I'd crossed a threshold the morning my key felt lighter, not heavier. That wasn't weakness. It was fluency. The door and I had rehearsed the same line for so many seasons, click, ordinary click, that the lane began to treat my sound as one of its own bones. That's the first secret of getting older alone. Make your pattern so reliable that even change has to knock politely. I shifted the house from speed to reach. Stools higher, broom with a longer handle. The coffer moved where my back could forgive me for needing it. The window latch learned to behave without wrestling. The lamp wick learned thrift. I posted small notices in places that mattered. At the fountain, near the bakehouse, if Joan doesn't answer by the second bell, try the begins. It wasn't drama. It was a map drawn in public. Respectability rules, love maps more than heroics. And a map keeps watchmen from inventing a rescue you didn't ask for. Income changed clothes, too. I took fewer rush jobs and more steady ones. Teaching stitches, repairing the tired hands of patients, finishing work others began. My ledger turned into a classroom, columns neat enough for a clerk to envy, margins fat with names of girls who needed their first order cosigned. Quiet guardianship replaced noisy hustle. I didn't stop earning. I stopped auditioning. The market understands that kind of dignity, even when men pretend they don't. I learned to price wisdom without making it a sermon. When a newly minted spinster came with fingers quick and eyes quicker, I charged less coin and asked 2 witnesses for her hours. "You'll pay me in future oaths," I said, and she did, standing at my left in church, speaking my steadiness into a clerk's ear when winter made me slow. That's the compound interest of age. Your students become your receipts, and gossip courts have to argue with a choir. Nights grew longer in the bones, so I let the street see me plan daylight better. Errands in one loop, fountain, guild, bakehouse, never backtracking into alleys that make even brave years stumble. I walked under saints and scales, not banners and boasts. If a stranger offered an arm that smelled more like inventory than kindness, I laughed and gave him my basket instead. Carry the bread, I'd say. Keys and locks keep doors. Props keep men honest. Illness visited with the courtesy of old acquaintances. A knock you can recognize. A voice that remembers your name. I kept the sickroom kit where a younger woman could find it without rummaging. Vinegar, thyme, the clean cloth folded like a promise. Doses were read out loud, ledger ready. Door a hand's breadth open so the lane could count my care. Parish fines sniff for secrecy. Age answers with transparency that makes sniffing look rude. When the midwife scolded me for lifting more than stories, I obeyed like a woman who plans to be around to disobey later. I pruned my circle, the way old trees drop branches before the storm. Some cousins liked to measure my solitude with their mouths. I measured it with bread and a calendar. "Come on Tuesdays," I said, "and bring a joke worth the crumbs." The ones who came became furniture you can lean on. The others faded into the background hum of the town. There, but not in the way. Freedom needs fewer people than youth imagines, and better ones than rumor recommends. The door learned to new theatre. I added a second latch that sings when tired hands forget to press it fully, and I hung a bell above the hinge with a voice the watchman recognized as mine. If a drunk hammered at the wood, the bell tattled to the street. Tattling can be holy when it's done for safety. I also practiced the older woman's art of ending conversations from inside the threshold. Broom in hand, smile arranged, proverb loaded, curfew keeps better time than memory. Even bold boots learn that sentence. Money softened its posture, but kept its spine. 2 purses still, coin and crumbs. But a third appeared. Thanks. I tracked it like currency. Letters read aloud at the porch. Public gifts that didn't need secrecy to survive. Repairs paid forward before they turned into favors with strings. Church courts like the smell of gratitude. It reminds them of their own better days. Gratitude is also insulation. When winter courts arrive sniffing, they bump their noses on a wall of small thank yous already on record. Travel shrank in miles and grew in method. I wrote road letters only for routes my knees believed in, walked at the speed of conversation, and slept where ledgers were visible and landladies ruled. Ferrymen still waved me aboard first. Age is a ticket in honest towns, and I paid them with raisins, and the kind of story that keeps oars from sulking. When the road tried to pity me into shame, I quoted prices instead. 2 skeins by Michaelmas. Witness welcome. Pity has no elbows when faced with arithmetic. Teaching became my finest door. I gathered 3 young women at the table and let them argue with linen, while I argued with silence. We practiced refusals and receipts, curfew choreography and market optics, laughter that blesses and laughter that bars. I gave each a spare key, not to my house, but to my method. A schedule written in their hand, a ledger page stamped with my spindle, a list of women who would speak for them on ugly days. In that way I moved in with them without carrying a bundle. And yes, sometimes the whispers circled back with old teeth. A woman so long alone must have bargains with the night. I answered by opening the window and letting bread cool where noses could argue on my behalf. Gossip courts are still courts. Present them with evidence. I also kept 1 ridiculous hat for feast days, black as a priest's conscience, trimmed with a single ribbon, too honest to flirt. Wear it, walk the long route, count the nods. Age can turn into theatre. I preferred to keep it as punctuation. What I wanted most in those silver years wasn't applause or fear. It was the unremarkable privilege of being presumed decent before I had to prove it. So I tended to the presumption the way I tended beeswax, warm, steady, applied thin and daily. I slept early, woke earlier, bought the most boring lamp oil, and poured my courage into other people's mornings. The lane repaid me by letting my name travel unescorted, which is an elderly woman's version of flying. When I felt the future step onto the threshold with its soft boots, I wrote my will again with less about objects and more about sentences. She kept ours. She taught others to keep theirs. She laughed in the right places. I left the spindle to the one who argued best with it, the ledger to the most stubborn pen, the broom to the girl who could end a conversation with kindness. And I left the door trained to one refrain that should outlive me. Click, ordinary click. So whoever turns the key next inherits both wood and weather. If you stand where I stood, palm on iron, the lane breathing like a friendly animal, know this: living alone never meant living without. It meant choosing your witnesses, rehearsing your piece, and letting the city memorize your rhythm until even your absence keeps decent time. That's the last craft and the first mercy. I've put every stitch I know into your pockets. Spend them with the calm insolence of someone who belongs. Here's where we set the broom down, warm our hands over the last loaf, and listen to the lane. Breathe. You've walked beside me through curfew bells and watchmen's nods, through keys and locks that speak in iron verbs and ledgers that testify when throats go dry. If you felt it, how an ordinary ritual can out-argue a noisy world, then you've grasped the quiet science of living alone without being alone. In my city, which often meant woman with a method, bread was proof, daylight was armor, and a broom was punctuation. The secret wasn't spectacle. It was repetition so steady the street learned to keep time with you. Now, bring it home. What's your version of the click? Ordinary click. Which habit could you rehearse until it becomes your bodyguard? A schedule, a boundary, a simple script that says daylight or not at all. Where are your modern gossip courts? And what small evidence, kindness logged, promises kept, doors opened just enough, could starve them of appetite? If you had to choose one move from this journey to carry tomorrow, would it be the ledger that remembers, the neighbors you choose as witnesses, or the joke that ends a bad conversation without starting a war? Tell me in the comments, which scene cut deepest, and which rule you'll borrow first. Who do you know? A sister, a friend, a quieter version of yourself, who needs this map? Share this video with them so the next door they turn doesn't shake. If this felt less like content and more like a small piece of armor, tap like so it travels farther. Subscribe and ring the bell to keep these fireside lessons coming. More hidden histories, more human strategies, more ways to be brave without being loud. I'll leave the lamp small, the window a hand's breadth open, and the loaf cooling where even the night must admit it smells like proof. When you're ready, come back. We'll set the next table together. Until then, K in palm, breath steady. Click, ordinary, click.